breaking down cultural boundaries, overcoming trauma, and changing direction to become unlimited. This is the Becoming Unlimited podcast with me, your host, Urvashi, aka Ush. Each week, we'll be discussing various ways in which you can be your best self and learn to dance with the universe. We'll also be chatting to some inspirational women from a diverse range of backgrounds, and I too will share some insight into how I changed my life using the universal laws and a lot of healing. So, let's dive in. Hi guys, welcome to the Becoming Unlimited podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Desiree Ruiz. Ruiz. I got it wrong, even though I asked you before.
I love you. You say it so much nicer with your accent.
Oh, bless you. She is a Canadian-born Filipino with an interesting upbringing, feeling as if she never fit in and wasn't enough. From a Filipino background, she used to tell people about her Spanish heritage and disconnected from her Filipino lineage. Feeling lost until she started her decolonizing journey. This is where she found what she was looking for in her ancestors and in her own DNA. Now she supports her community and is motivated to serve them every single day as a business coach and a soul purpose mentor. Her journey has been unconventional, and I'm really excited to dive in. So hi, Desiree, how are you?
Oh my God, thank you for that. The intros are always so heartfelt. Thank you for taking all of that information and making it your own for this intro. So I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm really good, really excited to talk to you. So before we dive in, I am going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests, and that is, what does it mean to you to be unlimited?
Unlimited for me is to be present in your body, to be outside of your head, and to really to lead from this place of your soul. If that I don't know if that sounds cheesy, but it really it's to lead from spirit, to lead from your intuition, lead from your body. Or I would say that the layers are, lead from your body, spirit, ancestors.
Interesting. So really just be completely aligned with who you are.
Exactly.
Yes. I love that. So tell me, as a Canadian-born Filipino, what was life like for you growing up?
Growing up, it was great. I mean, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Desiree. I go by she, her. And growing up as a second generation Filipino Canadian to immigrant parents was an interesting experience. But lucky for me, I grew up with a lot of other Filipinos with the same experience. So I never felt othered growing up. I never felt like I looked different. The experience was the same because most of the parents of the kids that I was around migrated at the same time. So the experience was similar with those that I grew up with up until maybe high school. And it wasn't until high school that I started to interact with different ethnicities and started to slowly feel othered, if anything.
And you really felt like you were different and your ethnicity was a thing, right? So you mentioned in your story that, you were made to feel ethnic and othered. So can you explain what that was and how that felt?
I'll just share some examples of what I felt. So, grade school with Filipino communities, grew up in the church. So, weekends were filled with Filipino activities. And then I get to high school, you're a teenager, you're slowly starting to build your own identity or explore your own identity. And I still had that core Filipino community, but I was in a school that was predominantly, there was a lot of Italians with a lot of money. So there was that money divide that I felt. And then a lot of them had Filipino help at home. So then it felt a little bit confusing because I was now the help, or my culture was the help. So again, nobody said you are different, but it was these feelings that I walked into, these spaces. It felt somewhat confusing, if anything, to me as a teenager. So, and then now looking back in hindsight, there is this shame. But I'm not a housekeeper. So being Filipino means either being Catholic, I was raised in the church, or the help. So then there was this unconscious disconnect that was slowly starting to happen
Yeah.
because I didn't want to be bunked into these boxes. Right.
Why do you think that it was you were either Catholic or the help? And it's around the world. I've seen it myself in Dubai and other places where even in the UK, one they live in their communities and they go out to work, and it is usually like construction for the men and housekeeping for the women. So why do you think that the Filipino community maybe stuck to this?
Oh my God. I mean, this is a very loaded question, but just historically, the Philippines was colonized for over 500 years. So about 400 years, it was colonized by Spain. And then we were sold for $20 million in, I'm not quite sure the year exactly, but literally just like handed off to the States. So we were colonized by Spain, and that's where the Christianity comes in. We were named the Philippines after Prince Philip, who never stepped foot in the country, right?
Wow. Okay.
And then we were tossed over, no longer needed. So basically, we're told we were a very strong and spiritual and matriarchal society, and similar to Canadian history. Somebody came and said, no, you're going to be better with Christianity. You are going to be better with the Spanish tradition. We're going to take everything, take what we want. And this is a better way of life, right? So that's what happened for 400 years. And then they no longer, then they said, hey, the States, come, just take them. And there was actually a podcast I was listening to yesterday about this. And so we went from the church to Hollywood. Because then you have the States that's colonized us now. And how did they colonize per se is, the influence. So the movies and the American influence, and education was a huge aspect. And at the time, that's when there was a huge demand for nurses. After World War I, World War II, so they needed a lot of nurses. So what did they do? They sent out educators to the countries that they had colonized and enforced, go to school, be a nurse, you can leave the country, you can have a better life. After 500 years of our country and our land being stripped of its resources, it's now, no, let's colonize your mind and tell you that life is better outside of the Philippines. So be a nurse, be a doctor, be a teacher, study, and have an education. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having an education, but get educated. Therefore, you can leave and you can come to the States for a better life. So, and again, what I'm learning through my journey is that there's different waves of migration, which changes the experience for so many people. So my parents migrated in the 70s when they were able to migrate because they were told, study, be a nurse, be a doctor, which is what my parents studied, and leave the country to have a better life. That's exactly what they did. And they migrated at a time where their diplomas were recognized in North America. Had they come 3 or 4 years later, it wouldn't have been recognized. Okay. So just think about this. You have the States that's basically that's colonized the country, colonized the Philippines, and said, hey, everybody, go to school, go to school, go to school, go to school, go to school. You'll have a better life. You need to leave to have a better life. Go to school. Everyone was getting their nursing degrees. Everyone was getting teaching degrees because that's what the need was in North America, in the States. Right? So everybody left. But then what ended up happening as there was an influx of Filipino immigrants coming into North America or to the States, they cut it and they said, no, we're no longer accepting nurses. We no longer need nurses or teachers. If you want to come, now we need domestic workers. Right. So you have these highly educated people from the Philippines that have been told or brainwashed, that's like what I'd like to say, that life is better outside. And I'm sure it's similar with India. It's life is better, leave, right? Get the higher education, but then we're going to gatekeep you. But if you want to come, be a domestic. So the biggest export of the Philippines is our labor.
Wow.
Right.
That's deep.
It's very deep. That's why it's a very loaded question.
Yeah.
So It's a very, very loaded question.
But it's interesting to understand that history, because, you know, a lot of listeners of this podcast like probably don't know that, because actually we don't know a lot about the Philippines apart from the beautiful beaches and, you know, like the archipelago, is that how you say it? You know, all the
Archipelago, yeah.
thank you, all the islands and things like that, right? We go there on holiday, and like this is so interesting for me because I didn't know about this. You know, obviously we know that India was colonized by the British rule and the British Raj, and then, you know, they broke up the country, and honestly since then it's just been war between the two states of like India and Pakistan at most points of, you know, since that happened, in whenever it happened. But it's interesting to hear that actually they promised one thing and that didn't happen. So you kind of went, yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, and then you also mentioned Dubai. I mean, I had gone to Dubai in 2007, and it was an interesting, very, very interesting. And it's not necessarily, I apologize in advance for anybody that's from Dubai that might be listening. Based on my experience, I'm not quite sure if I would go back. And it really felt, and again, the Filipinos were in service. There was this invisible hierarchy, right, that I had never experienced, maybe because I'm from Canada and North America, but there was hierarchy, depending on where your passport was, depending on the color of your skin, and Filipinos were in service and the Indians were, you know, not even in service. So it was literally like, and I had a friend, we were staying with friends that were locals in Dubai, and they said, oh yeah, you kill a camel, you go to jail for 3 weeks. You kill an Indian or a Filipino, maybe a slap on the wrist.
Disgusting.
It's disgusting, right? But again, this is unfortunately the world that we live in. But where does that stem from? I've just been getting more and more curious about the why. Like, where is this coming from? Who made these decisions? How did we get here? Right? And as you mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, Filipinos are the biggest export that comes out of the Philippines is labor. So yes, I've traveled to Turks and Caicos and so many different islands. There's Filipinos everywhere because again, it is leave the country for a better life, right? So they are leaving their country, but then what happens when they leave the country? What happens to their kids? There's this disconnect that's happening. What are they doing? They're leaving the country. They're going to England to take care of your kids or your friends' kids, you know, and what's happening to their kids? What is the effect? What is the effect of this that's happening?
Yeah, amazing. It's so interesting. But just to change tangent a little bit, if that's all right.
Of course.
You know, you mentioned to me before we started this podcast today that, you know, your journey started at divorce. Then you went on this decolonization journey, and now you're on this Dharma journey. So can you just kind of go into that a little bit for us? Like, what was it that brought you to this journey towards your Dharma? Now, how did you get there?
Yeah, I always say divorce, decolonization, and Dharma. And as I mentioned earlier, children of immigrants, and you know, I feel like it's similar in an Indian household, but for Asians or Filipinos, it's keep your head down, be a people pleaser, do everything for everybody else, you know, go to school. You know, I actually studied in university. My first year was in accounting because why? It's safe. You'll get a job after. The complacency of the choices that you make to stay safe. But luckily for me, spirit was always very loud. I dropped out for a few months and then went back in marketing because I am a people person. So you know, like when I look at the red thread of my life, I realized that like, wow, there were so many times that I did things to stay safe or did things to check off boxes for mommy and daddy. But then I always ended up choosing what was aligned for me. It was very messy in the process. But yes, fast forward, you know, checked off all of the boxes, got married, you know, built businesses, went to school, started the family. And it wasn't until my late 30s after having my daughter that I got a divorce. And it was through the divorce, I always say that the divorce was the worst yet best thing that ever happened to me because it was an opportunity for me to choose me. And it was an opportunity to start living for myself versus, you know, the tendency was to do things for other people or attach myself to other people's dreams because I never had the space to dream or to ask myself what I actually wanted. Right. So the divorce was this leap of faith, this jumping out of an airplane that gave me the space to start asking myself, like literally, I was 35 years old and I said, what I couldn't answer, you know, if you ask me, what do you want? What makes you happy? I couldn't answer that at 35
Let
because I
me
had
ask you
lived my
now.
life.
Can you answer that
Yeah.
question now?
Yeah, what do I want? Oh my God, so
Yeah, what
many
makes you
things,
happy?
so many things. I mean, learning. I'm a forever. I love to tell everyone that I'm a forever learner. I love to
Yeah.
learn. I love to learn about different cultures, and you know, the decolonize that leads me into the decolonization. I started learning about my culture and
Yeah.
started to get curious on my about my culture. And because, you know, divorce is an interesting thing, or any sort of huge life transition is really interesting because you're recalibrating, you know, shifting your identity, right?
Yes.
So it was a huge shift, and it was a huge part of my identity. I had been with my daughter's father for 13 years. So it was a huge part of my identity, you know, professionally as well, because we had built businesses together. So my professional and my personal identity was linked to somebody else.
Wow.
So it was a huge reset in my life. And now I'm able to, you know, now I know what I want. Now I'm grounded in the things that bring me joy by myself. And so I have a long list of things that I love. And we could talk about that later.
So you say that, you know, for a long time, your professional, personal life was linked to somebody else. Now, there are many women out there who are feeling this right now. Like they are, you know, maybe they've married somebody who earns so much more money than them that, you know, they've ended up just becoming a housewife, or they're stuck in a situation for 13 years in a divorce. What would you say to somebody in that position right now who feels stuck, who feels so entwined with somebody else, but yet doesn't actually want to be there anymore and feels like actually they need to
Mm,
jump, they need to leap? How would you advise someone to navigate that situation?
yeah. Well, if you are that person that's in those shoes, I just want to say that I see you. And it's hard, but it's not impossible. And that's actually who I love to work with, the woman who is either uh, newly divorced or wants to avoid divorce, right? Because I don't believe divorce is the answer for everybody. It was the answer for me. But there is a way to not get a divorce, right? And to connect with yourself again. And
Yeah.
the simple answer and the short answer is really just to start doing things for yourself, even if it's small. You know, start to get curious. You know, what did you do before? What did you like to do before the relationship? You know, what are things you've always wanted to do, even if it's just like starting off by making a list. Not, you know,
Yeah.
not many of us don't have the energy or the time or the capacity to actually travel or go to a concert, but just bringing it into your energy field and your vortex and your aura, and just saying, wow, I really love to go salsa dancing before I got married. And again, just start to activate those memories in
Yeah.
your body is something. You know,
Yeah.
there was a client that I had worked with. She has 4 daughters, married for over 20 years. She forgot that she liked to paint. So the homework I gave her is just start carving out time to paint or be
Yeah.
creative again, and then see what happens. You know, like oftentimes we're like, no, I can't do the retreat in Bali. I can't find myself. So I'm just going to sit in this puddle of misery because there's no solutions. But I'm a big promoter of baby steps. You know, what are these small daily actions that you can take that are all for you, just for you? And it's not
Yeah.
easy. Trust me. I know it's not easy, but you know, in hindsight, I would go back in my marriage, and it was an amazing union for 13 years. I would go back and reframe just a little bit, because I was so like us, we, family, that I did lose myself. I did
Yeah.
forget about myself because I was too focused, if anything,
Yeah.
on trying to be the union, that I eventually did lose myself.
Yeah. So you lost your individuality. And you're right. Like when you are in that kind of situation, just try and come home to who you are. Find your own self-love and that self-worth inside you again. And just
Yes.
become that woman that you always knew you were and used to be. Because it can be really hard to come out of that situation. And, you know, a couple of my clients are going through that at the moment as well. And it's really tough because they're always pulled back in. There's always something that pulls them back in, whether it's a text from the ex or something like that, you know. But, you know, one thing I always say is just ground yourself in who you are.
Yeah.
find those passions, spend some time outdoors, just do anything to stop getting pulled back in.
Or to ask, I would invite them also, like, why do you think you keep on getting lured in? Why is this validation luring you in? This type of validation luring you in as well is a question.
Yeah.
Right.
So previously, a couple of minutes ago or so, you mentioned that when you were at school, you were, or university or college, is what you call it out there, don't you? You started going to college with like Italians and Spanish, and they had Filipino help and all of that kind of stuff. So I read about you that you used to tell people you were Spanish, your heritage was Spanish to maybe fit in. Can you just talk a little bit about what that did for you and why you felt you needed to, apart from the fact that obviously, they had Filipino help?
Yeah, I love this question. Thank you for asking. So my name is Desiree. My full name is Desiree Escalante Ruiz. And Ruiz is a Spanish name, and Escalante as well, because we were colonized by Spain. And my great grandfather is of Spanish descent.
Okay.
And again, noticing now, years later, this proximity to whiteness that I had even as a child, or the attention that I would receive going into white spaces when I would say, oh yes, I'm Filipino, but my great grandfather was Spanish. Because oftentimes they would see my last name and they would say, and even today, it's, oh, but are you Spanish? Because it is a Spanish last name. And so again, think about it. I'm a teenager. What do teenagers want? We want to be accepted, right? So here I am in this space. They see me. I look similar to the help, or again, these are the stories that I was telling myself. So they would, what's your name? Desiree Ruiz. Oh, Ruiz is a Spanish name. Yes. My parents are from the Philippines, but my great grandfather is from Spain. And I realized that I had been saying it over and over for decades, because again, it was something that just, hey, they're facts. It's a factual, it's factual information, but I didn't realize how much I was saying it until I decolonized. And I realized that by dropping, hey, yes, I'm Asian. Yes, I look like your help, but my great grandfather is white, is this subconscious proximity to whiteness that I felt was keeping me safe or keeping me seen in these spaces.
Wow.
I know I no longer say, like, basically saying that it's not enough for me to say, my name is Desiree, I'm Filipino. I'm Filipina, period.
Yeah. Okay, right? So now, obviously, you're very comfortable in your skin. At what point did that change for you? When did you become comfortable with your heritage? And what was it that led you to that?
The decolonization journey, right? Because, and this is very recent, because up until 3 or 4 years ago, I was still leading with, yes, hi, my name is Desiree, I'm Filipino, but my great grandfather is from Spain.
Oh, wow.
I was still leading with that up until a few years ago. And it was my mentor. When I was going through my divorce, I had dinner with a good friend of mine who is now my mentor, who has been my mentor and one of the co-founders of my nonprofit organization for the Filipino community. And she had lovingly said, hey, she called me out on it, called me in on it per se, that she said, hey, you don't need to tell me, you don't need to talk about your great grandfather. It is enough for you to just introduce yourself as being Filipina. And I said, oh, but everyone always asks me if I'm Spanish. And she kind of like planted that seed, didn't push, because at the time she knew that I just wasn't ready to receive all of that information. And then it wasn't until I started getting more and more curious and was ready to dig deeper that I reached out to her. And I was like, oh my God, you were planting these seeds and I just wasn't ready. And now I realize where that comes from. I realize that I didn't feel enough saying, hey, my name is Desiree, period. I don't have to tell you where I'm from, right? Why does that even matter? Why do I have to validate anything, right? But we go into these spaces and we drop university degrees, certifications, we drop all of these things, we drop friends, we drop, I know this person, I've been to this school, I have X amount of followers, whereas it should just be enough
to be you.
To be you.
So you have a daughter now. What is life like for her, and how different is it? And like with everything that you've done in your life journey, how different is it for your daughter?
Oh my God. I have a perfect example. So I mentioned growing up, people pleaser, wouldn't express my emotions, wouldn't use my voice, wouldn't say anything because I was scared, right? I was like, let's just, keep my head down to make mommy and daddy happy. So that was my experience up until my divorce, more or less, right? Meanwhile, I have this super sassy, super energetic, manifesting generator, 9-year-old girl. We were getting our nails done. And so she's getting her nails done. She's listening to her iPad and she chose a light pink. And then the technician put, I think, a light purple. And then without a doubt, she looked at me and she said, I said light pink. And
Sassy.
and my reaction, not rude, but she was like, Mom, that's not what I chose.
Yeah.
And my reaction, what came up for me was, oh, don't be rude, but she already started. Don't be inconsiderate. Like all of these things came up for me. And then I looked at her and I said, but she already started. I said, oh, but she already started. And she said, I wanted light pink, firm. And then I said, and I looked at the technician and I said, oh, do you think you can maybe just put it over? Because I don't want to waste her time, right? I don't want to be a burden. Was what was coming up for me.
Okay.
And then I said, can you just put it over? And then she looked at me and she was like, don't worry about it. Like, I'll just take it off and I'll switch it. And then my daughter, again, just looked at me and she was like, I said light pink, like, Mom. And I had to take a step back and I was like, wow, we are coming into the world completely different. Like she now demands, like when we watch a movie, we actually went to watch, a friend of mine is a dance teacher in a high school, and we watched a show and the dancers were predominantly white. And my daughter is this 9-year-old that is like, she looked at me and she said, Mommy, everyone's white.
Ooh. And
she is a mixed race kid. Her father's from France and she is a mixed race kid, but she will now say, everyone, why is there's no Asians or there's nobody of color, everyone is white. My 9-year-old, I'm only learning this now. I'm 44 and my 9-year-old is going into the world at 9 with the knowledge that I know only now.
That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, that's a massive respect to how you brought her up. Obviously, her human design is a big part of that, right? So manifesting generators, we're a little bit crazy. We've got so much energy. But yeah, no, that's definitely down to you as well. So she's learned it. It's not just it's not all just, innate in her. It is inherited as well. So, big respect to you for,
thank you,
bringing up a daughter who knows herself and knows that actually we are a multicultural society and there should be more than just white people in the dance show,
100%,
that's incredible.
100%.
That's incredible. So a question I got for you. So obviously there are a lot of Filipino famous people in this world, the likes of Enrique Iglesias, Nicole Scherzinger, Bruno Mars. There is a list. However, I did not know they were Filipino until my ex told me they were Filipino. Why is this? Why is their heritage hidden?
Is it really hidden though?
I don't know. I just didn't know. Like, it's not like, you think Nicole Scherzinger's Hawaiian. I thought she was Hawaiian. Enrique Iglesias, Spanish, and Bruno Mars, again, Hawaiian.
Well, again, it's the proximity to whiteness. Like take Enrique Iglesias, Spanish Filipino. Like I only learned about this later, but Spanish Filipino, again, proximity to whiteness. It is usually the white side. Look at me. I am Filipino, but I am 1/8 Spanish. Proximity to whiteness.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, why it's not known, I think maybe, it's not obvious, especially since they're mixed race. And I would also say that it is the proximity to whiteness that probably takes the white side of them takes more precedence. Yeah, I mean, I have again, I mentioned with my daughter, she's mixed race, and I always say, you're not a fraction, you're Filipino and you're French. It's no, and she's like, oh, but I have like a quarter Spanish. And I'm like, no, you are not a fraction. Stop with the numbers, But yeah, I think it's because like there are a lot of mixed everything, especially nowadays. We live in a world where everybody's mixed, right? It's the global majority. We are the global majority.
But you wouldn't think that. You still, you know, we are, but you still feel like actually maybe we are still a minority.
But why though? Why? Where do you think that comes from? We are not like
The colonization and like
well,
made to
it's
feel
not
like a
even
minority.
it's colonial mentality.
Mm.
It's not colonization, it's colonial mentality.
Okay.
Again, it's colonial mentality that, in my opinion, that's just indoctrinated in our psyches, in our spirit. And so I love to say that we are the generation that's breaking these.
I don't know about you in America and Canada, but we have this term here, ethnic minority. Have you ever heard that term? Do you
No,
use it
tell me
out there?
more.
It's just a way of describing people who are not white. Like, I don't have a single bit of whiteness in me. I am pure Indian with a little bit of Persian. Okay, I don't know what fraction, doesn't matter. You know, I'm Indian, born in Great Britain. But one of the things when you fill out a form, I mean, now it's kind of expanded into being like, you know, Asian American, Asian British, you know, all these kinds of things. But back in the day, it was like we were just bulked into one ethnic minority. It's
Is
just
it
something that I
still
remember.
is that still the case today?
No. Now they kind of segregate it. And now we've got a list of like 20, 30 different things you can be. And it's just crazy. Like, you know, you're Indian or you're Indian British. Like, can I just be Indian? You know, why do I need to be British Indian? But yeah, I just wanted to wonder if that was a thing. And I think the whole concept of putting ethnic and minority into one statement makes us still feel like a minority, because a lot of people will go, yeah, my ethnicity is, or I'm ethnic minority. And I don't know about you, it happens a lot in the UK where people go, so where are you from? And you're like, oh, I'm from London. No, where are you from? Oh, I was born in Leicester. No, but where are you from?
Yep.
What do you mean? What's your heritage? Say that in the first place then, you know, if that's what you really want to know. And why do you need to know? You know, why do you need to know?
Why do you need to know, and why are they assuming because of your exterior appearance that you are not from there? Same thing with me. I'm born and raised in Canada, and in Montreal. I'm from Montreal, so Quebec, where we also speak French. And it's you speak English or you speak French really well. You know, this assumption that because of how I look and how I speak, that I'm speaking it really well because I'm actually not from here. Right? I mean, this is another loaded question, but yes, very, very similar experiences here. This assumption, because again, you are born in the UK, right? Your heritage, your ancestors are from India, right? It doesn't mean
actually, if I'm honest, my parents were born in Africa. So that confuses everyone even that little bit more. You know, they were born in East Africa. So they're just like, yeah, but you're Indian, you're African. I remember this one time I went to Mexico, and my hair is naturally quite curly. It's straight today, but it's naturally quite curly. And I put mousse in it and it looked really curly. And I'd obviously took on a lot of color. I went a lot darker. And I was in Mexico, and this American couple from Michigan literally was in the Hard Rock Cafe or something ridiculous, having like a margarita. And this American couple, they were like, oh my God, you're a real life Mexican. I'm like, no, I'm English. And they're like, but why are you brown? And I'm like, because I'm Indian. So you're an Indian from England? How does that work? And I'm like, okay, how am I going to explain this to you? And I was like, I just can't. It was like I was you know, something weird and wonderful and wacky for them to like look at. And I was like, I'm literally just British.
And if you dissect that, look at the perception. The perception is an English person, there's only one way for an English person, a true English person to look. Period. Is basically what that whole conversation was. It was because you are English, you were born and raised there. Yes, your ancestors, your heritage are from different areas. You are born there, just like I'm Canadian. I'm born and raised here. But people see us and they say, oh no, but the picture that we see on what Canadians look like is a white person. And even so, there's like so many ads now that have people of color on, but it doesn't click, it doesn't compute for so many people, which where's the problem? Where is that coming from?
Okay, so I'm going to change tangent again, if that's okay.
I love it.
So you were telling me before we started about your trip to Bali. Obviously I'm really interested in Bali because I'm going in a few weeks, but what triggered that trip was your father's death and you grieving over your father's death. So can you tell me about this trip and what happened? Because obviously it's a very spiritual place, a very Hindu place as well, actually. And so I'm really interested to understand kind of how the death of your father and grieving him led to that journey and what came out the other end.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, so I went to Bali in 2012, and at the time it had been a year that my daughter's father and I had been trying to conceive. It wasn't working. Prior to that, my father had passed away in 2009. So my father passed away in 2009. I went to Bali in 2012, thinking that I needed a break from the stress of trying to have a baby. We were going through IVF. It was just really, really difficult. And I really just emotionally, physically, and spiritually, it was draining for me. So I said, you know what? My friend is having a retreat there. It was super last minute. She luckily had a spot, messaged me and said, hey, can you come? Turned out points, everything worked out. So I went to Bali.
Always does.
Always works out, right? And it was my first solo vacation. I just took a backpack and a carry-on, and it was such a beautiful experience. And again, it was like to relieve the pressure of the baby making, the baby pressure. So then I get to Bali and Indonesia and the Philippines are very intertwined culturally, right? We're just, again, colonization created division and created borders, but there's a lot of similarities in our culture. And I had only gone to the Philippines once when I was 8, so it was my first time back in Asia, if anything.
Okay.
So it was my first time back in Asia, alone, on a retreat, and and if you look back on my journal entries, I was grieving the fact that I couldn't have a child, but all of my journal entries ended up linking to my father's death.
Okay.
And a lot of the release and a lot of the healing that happened was actually around my father's death. And because I was in Bali, a lot of people looked like my father. A lot of things, I remember taking a tour. We went on a tour of a coffee tour, and the host picked up a leaf. He stopped. He was we were walking in the forest, and he stopped and he said, hey, look, and he goes, look at this leaf. And it was this giant leaf. And he said, look at this beautiful leaf. You know what this tree is? And he said, this is a cassava tree. And my father's specialty was cassava cake. And so he pulled out this leaf and he said, look at this leaf. And then he had this long pinky nail, and it's a Filipino thing. They have long nails. I don't know. And so he had the long nail like my father, and he had the cassava leaf in his hand. And I realized that Bali for me was the space for me to grieve my father, because I didn't necessarily have time to grieve him here, taking care of my mother and just all of the logistics after his death. And so Bali was really this connection to my father spiritually. Wow. And it was amazing. And then I came home from Bali, did my second round. I did my second round of IVF and then a transfer, and then I eventually got pregnant with my daughter. So I always tell my daughter, whenever she says, oh, Lolo is grandfather in Filipino, she says, Lolo, I didn't get to meet Lolo. And I always tell her, Lolo actually brought you to me. And thank you for reminding me of that trip. But it was, it's beautiful. It's so magical. I didn't stay in the busy areas. I was really in a remote fisherman town with the Balinese. So it was a really, really beautiful experience and I encourage anybody that's going to Bali to really try, because there's Indonesians, but then there are folks that are native to Bali. And so just get curious about that, or I know you're going in a few months.
Yeah, well, actually, 60 days? I know, not counting or anything.
I'll try to see if my friends are still there. I have friends that, so my Canadian friend married a Balinese man, and they were doing tours, and they were involved in the retreat that I had attended. But when we left them, I went to Kuta and spent a few days in Kuta and Seminyak with a few friends.
Yeah.
And the energy was completely different.
Okay.
And then I was told it's because a lot of it, not a lot of it's a tourism city. Yes. And most people are not necessarily from Bali. They're coming there because that's where the tourism is.
Yeah.
So again, it's very different. So
I'm
I
actually really
encourage
looking,
you.
yeah, I can't wait. I'm actually looking forward to, I'm spending like 4 whole days in Ubud, and I'm looking forward to that. Like I feel like that is the home of like spirituality, and I'm going to go to the temples and the Chi pyramids. I really want to do a sound healing over there. So there's a lot to do in Bali, and I'm really excited for it. So 2 weeks in Bali, 2 days in Kuala Lumpur. It should be an incredible trip.
Oh yeah, yes, so magical, so magical.
Amazing. So tell me, what does it feel like to you to be Filipina today?
Oh, so much pride, so much pride, so much pride. And I like to say again, the decolonization helped me connect with the 1,000, 2,000 years of my lineage. Whereas my whole life, I feel like I was just given 4 chapters of a book. You know, like life started when Spain arrived, really, which there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not trying to erase that, but I never felt connected to that. I never felt connected to being Christian. I never felt connected to, you know, the rigidness and just certain things of the last 500 years or 500 years of our history. Whereas when I started to get curious about what happened before they arrived, that's where it started to get really powerful for me, because I had always been interested in spirituality and this connection to nature, and then learning that that's where I come from. And those are my pre-colonial roots. So to answer your question, there's just a really huge sense of groundedness and pride with being Filipina.
Amazing. So you did say that actually, you know, you found pride in your DNA and your heritage and learning about your ancestry. And, you know, obviously, like, I don't know about today if you're still Christian or if there's something else that's part of you, but like, where do you feel you fit into this whole religion versus spirituality thing?
I had this conversation with my mom, who is uber like bored, like one notch under becoming a nun. And so she had always been very strict with the religion, and we prayed the rosary every week. And I went to a private all girls Catholic school. And we've had this conversation recently, and she said, okay, if you don't want to come to church with me, if you're not Christian, what do you believe in? And I said, I believe in nature. And then I think it's also age, right? She's turning 84. So, you know, like we've come to this place now where she's like, okay, as long as you are turning to something higher than us, you know?
Okay.
And so how do I feel about the Catholic Church? Again, I don't connect to it, but I also don't discount anybody that feels aligned and finds solace with prayer and being part of the church. Because I realize now that is also, for my mother, that is her meditation. Sitting and praying is her quiet time, is her meditation. And was like that for 4 generations, right? When Spain introduced the church. And there's a lot, there's not all bad, right? And if that's what brings my community together, if that's what makes them feel grounded, then that's wonderful. It's just not necessarily for me, and that's okay.
And it's just another way to get connected to the universe or the divine or source. You can call it whatever you want, God, anything you want. It's the same thing. It's a higher power.
Yes.
Right? Amazing. So, Desiree, we are going to wrap up. I have one more question for you, or an ask from you. What is one tip that you would give our listeners today to guide them on becoming their most unlimited self?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, just start choosing you in whatever shape or form, whether that's being 5 minutes of quiet time before your kids wake up, or getting curious or remembering what sparks you up or brought you joy, before life got busy. To just find small pockets of joy and small pockets where you can just regroup and remember who you are and what lights you up.
Incredible. I would say add some playtime into that as well. It's always good to just get out and play with your inner child wherever you are, right? So I have this habit of going on a walk, and then if I pass a little park, I'll just jump on the swing for 2 minutes. And it's incredible how just alive you feel after doing something like that.
But you see, first, and maybe this is human design, but you see play, going back to the version of me when I was going through the divorce, if you asked me to play, I wasn't able, it wasn't as automatic as it sounds like it is for you, because there was this, oh, but I'm going to get in trouble. Am I allowed to do that? Can I do that? So there was resistance. So playing, I notice, and I'm mindful of this also, depending on where people are coming from, it's not as easy for some, right?
Do you think that is, I know I said that was our last question, but do you think that that is your human design? The whole being able to play easier.
I think it's human design, but then again, it's also tied to my upbringing, right? It's, oh, am I going to get in trouble? Am I allowed to play? I didn't necessarily, I had space. I don't want to sound like I had a horrible childhood, but it was very,
strict.
It was, it was strict, and I was validated for doing, not being.
I know that
right?
feeling. Yeah.
Yes. So to say, oh, just play. I mean, I watched my daughter and she's completely aligned. I wasn't like that as a child because I didn't know. And I think, yes, it is a little bit of the human design, but I think it was just the upbringing that I was dealt, which is fine. I found my way.
You did. Incredibly. Yeah. I would say for me, I played a lot when I was younger, but there were certain things I was told not to do, like don't laugh too much. Don't, literally laughing was this thing that we were told not to do. People think you're easy or you're, a bit floozy, that kind of thing. And I was just like, okay, now I laugh whenever I can with my friends. Honestly, laughing is so good for the soul. So Desiree, how do people get in contact with you? Should they wish to follow you, work with you, or whatever, or just touch base?
So I am very active on Instagram. My Instagram account is at des.escalante, ESCALANTE. Escalante is my middle name and my mother's maiden names. So very, very near and dear to me. Or my website, DesireeRuiz.com. And I guess you'll add that in the show notes, or do you want me to spell that out here?
No. I'll add that into the show notes.
I don't want to bore anybody with the spelling of my
www. Amazing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to connect.
It was so lovely to connect, and I'm really excited because I get to meet you next week in Texas for the Highest Self Weekender. So that will be incredible. So thank you so much for your time, and don't forget to follow me as well on Unlimited Urvashi. And as always, my DMs are open and you can book in calls if you want to. So please do, and I will catch you on next week's show.